We are now in the post-Trump administration era. Even though Trump is no longer in office, his movement continues to live on through his ardent supporters and elected officials who continue to stick by his side. And one of those elected officials is Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin. Ron has made the headlines recently for making outlandish comments about the Capitol insurrection. While Ron is finally getting the criticism he deserves, he's been a controversial figure well before Trump was ever elected. Johnson was part of the Tea Party wave that got elected alongside Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin. Now, if you remember, the Tea Party wave pretended to be a populist grassroots movement calling for fiscal responsibility and to lower the government debt. But it was all a farce. Essentially, it was a billionaire-funded movement used to fight for greater tax cuts for the rich. Now, 11 years later, and Ron Johnson is up for re-election in 2022, and he's created a lot of political enemies. So far, 3 candidates on the Democratic side have announced that they will be running to oust Ron Johnson. Those 3 candidates are Tom Nelson, the county executive of Outagamie County, and former Bernie delegate, Alex Lazary, the senior VP of the Milwaukee Bucks and the son of a billionaire hedge funder, and Sarah Godlewski, the current Wisconsin state treasurer. On today's podcast, we're going to discuss the Democratic candidates, what they have to offer, and who we think has the best chance to go toe-to-toe with Ron Johnson.
So we always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Our Wisconsin Revolution podcast. My name is Andre Walton. I am the Southeast Regional Organizer for Our Wisconsin Revolution, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Will Walter. How you doing today, Will?
I'm doing well, Andre, about as well as one can be considering, we're going on, 14, 15 months of this whole global pandemic thing. But, other than that, I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad the weather is finally a little bit nice considering we've been through a harsh winter plus a pandemic. So at least we can now kind of get out the house. So, but at the end of the day, we're still in the political shitstorm. So just like everything, it's a little bit bittersweet. But today we are going to be talking about 3 political, or actually 4 now, political candidates for the Senate seat for Ron Johnson to go up against him. And so far, it's Alex Lazary, who is the senior VP of the Milwaukee Bucks and son of billionaire hedge funder. We have Tom Nelson, who is the county executive for Outagamie County. And we have Sarah Godlewski, who is currently the state treasurer. And there's one more who recently declared. And do you know who that is, Will?
Yes, Dr. Jillian Bettino. I believe she is a radiologist. And she, 20 plus year career in medicine and public health. So, she's pretty well versed in the healthcare system and what it takes to assist American citizens in getting through some of the major problems we have with our healthcare system.
That's pretty interesting. We don't normally see too many doctors run for office, so definitely interested to see what her platform is and what she's running on. So I guess we'll start with the elephant in the room, which is Alex Lazary, and the reason why I call him elephant because their family has fat pockets.
The financial elephant in the room.
Exactly. Like I said, he's the son of a hedge fund billionaire and senior VP of the Milwaukee Bucks. And his dad is actually like part owner or half owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. So they have deep pockets. But, basically his candidacy is kind of out of nowhere to me, considering like he just recently moved to Milwaukee. He doesn't really have too many roots here. He's kind of, I think he just has political ambitions, but he's
played the neoliberal coastal elite that the right wing like to whine and cry about, and rightfully so, especially in a place like Wisconsin. Those type of, the extremely wealthy coastal elite don't exactly represent the the people of Wisconsin. But then again, Donald Trump was also a extremely wealthy coastal elite, and they ate that shit up. So maybe it just
Right.
depends on what side of the political spectrum you're on. If you're on my team, it's okay. But
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to if you're on my team, and that's how it works out in politics. But what's interesting about Alex Lazary is that well, he doesn't really have much policy on his webpage, but he did go in march with the Black Lives Matter protests after the Jacob Blake situation. And that's pretty much his only credential with politics at this point. So he doesn't really have like any credentials besides like working with the DNC to get the convention here. So he does have ties to them. But what I find interesting out of all of this is that pretty much the Milwaukee political establishment is just falling right behind him, even though he really doesn't have a proven record. He did, march with Black Lives Matter protests, but that really wasn't a hard thing to do because, everybody was kind of like, yes, we have to stand here with these protesters because the situation with George Floyd was just so egregious. If you stood against that, you were just like, you were wrong no matter what. And I kind of see this, and I may be wrong, and who knows, we'll find out sooner or later. But I felt like that was a political calculation for him because he knew he was going to run for office pretty soon. And he was like, hey, maybe I can get some like political points if I go and march with Black Lives Matter, because I don't think he has any history of being at any Black Lives Matter protests or any kind of protests of that matter before actually coming to Milwaukee. So I don't know. I think he just has some political ambitions. I don't know his true motives, but I guess we'll soon find that out soon. But it does.
well, remember too that the Bucks were the first team to kind of take their protest to the next level when they sat out a game. They said, we're not going to play tonight. We're going to take this moment to kind of point out the injustice, and we're going to stand behind the BLM movement, which I thought was incredible. First of all, you need to hit the powers that be in their wallet, or nothing will ever change. But if that's your team, your father owns that team, you're the senior vice president. It's kind of like you said, it's a no-brainer political point wise to step in and do something in that accord as well. I mean, to me, Lazary is about as establishment as you can get. You think about what he's done in the past. His own website lists that he worked in various roles for the Obama administration, including special assistant to chief of staff to the chief of staff to senior advisor Valerie Jarrett. And he was also the deputy counselor for strategic engagement to the senior advisor, where he worked on business outreach and job counsel, according to his website. He also lists that he was, quote, leading the bid for Milwaukee to host the 2020 Democratic National Convention, serving as the chair of the Milwaukee 2020 Bid Committee and the finance chair for the Democratic Convention's host committee. Personally, especially speaking as someone who was a Bernie Sanders delegate to that convention, getting the convention to come to Milwaukee was huge. I will give him massive props for that. That would have been, if the pandemic hadn't been raging at that time, hundreds of millions of dollars directly injected into the Milwaukee economy, and you can never underestimate the value of that kind of money. But as you said as well, it's been frankly stunning how quickly a lot of the Milwaukee establishment politicians have just kind of fallen in line behind him. I don't know what he actually believes from a policy perspective. His website lists that, quote, Alex believes that progressive values are good for business, paying workers family-sustaining wages, providing them with good benefits, and treating everyone with the dignity and respect they deserve doesn't have to be controversial. Okay, that's, I think the vast majority of all sane people would agree with that, but that's not actually, you're not definitively telling me what you think. Saying something like
it's basically saying something without saying anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's excellent. He's already perfected the political speak of saying something that sounds good without actually having concrete ideas to back up what he wants to get accomplished. A line like, Alex believes that progressive values are good for business. Okay, well, what does that mean? Progressive values to you and progressive values to me could be 180-degree difference of opinion. We don't actually know what that means. Do you have a stance on a single-payer system? Do you have a stance on the $15 minimum wage? Do you have a stance on the Green New Deal? Do you have a stance on marijuana legalization? I mean, there's a number of these hot topic issues that you easily could come out and say what you believe, but instead, you're going to beat around the bush by saying, the generic phrases that could encompass any of those type of things. And I think that is what's particularly frustrating for me, outside of the fact that his father, Mark, is, a billionaire hedge fund manager, co-founder of Avenue Capital Group. So this is a person who's been heavily involved. He's a DNC mega donor. It just screams establishment as you can get, which is not, in my opinion, a good thing in the slightest.
Yeah, it's not really good at all, but I think there's something even more more of a red flag to me is that he actually worked at Goldman Sachs as an analyst. I don't know how long ago that was, because you did mention that he was part of the Obama administration working with them. But that's just a red flag to me. And the reason why I say that is because, as you know, there was a lot of Goldman Sachs people in the Trump administration. And that just kind of further hints to me that, this Republican and Democratic, no matter which kind of way the political winds blow, it's business as usual. The financial elite always have power, and they always are in line when it comes to economic issues. So I think, he might be in line with progressives on, Black Lives Matter and social issues, but I highly doubt that he will be in line with progressives when it comes to economic issues. So we'll see when it comes time, but and when he eventually puts policies on his website. But I mean, that's just a huge red flag to me, and I'm not really on board with that. But again, we'll see when the time comes. But I mean, one of the things that also stood out to me about Alex Lasry is that he was asked why he's running, right? And that's always a really good question, because your why is the reason why a lot of people are going to attract to you, why your campaign is important, and it's the basis of your campaign. It's the basis of your campaign's existence. And this is what he said. He said he's running because Johnson was spreading conspiracies and lies, and he doesn't represent the people. Now that just doesn't make any sense to me. That's why you're running? Like, what makes you think you represent the people? And first and foremost, why aren't you running to help people economically? Why aren't you running to fix the current situation that is literally boiling over in our country, which is misrepresentation, money in politics, corruption in government? Exactly. He didn't say anything about that. He's talking about Ron Johnson's lies. Like, every politician lies. That's a very, very low bar, and I'm sure you're going to be lying at some point too. So should you get elected out of office if you lie? So I bet he wouldn't use that standard against himself. So that really stood out to me. And what are your thoughts on his statements on why he's running?
Well, I will say that he is correct. If his argument boils down to because anything would be better than Ron Johnson, I'm not going to disagree with that. I think that there is literally any human being in this country, minus a very minute few of already extremist conservatives, would be a superior candidate than Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson is abysmal. He is arguably the worst senator in America. He's a travesty, and he's an embarrassment to the state and to the hardworking, decent people of Wisconsin. So, if the point that he was trying to make was simply, well, why not me? It's got to be someone, and anyone would be better than Ron Johnson. Sure, I agree with that. That's completely accurate. But at the same time, what then differentiates you, Alex, from the other Democratic candidates who will be running, because that's really what you should be focusing on. Is what's going to separate you from another more progressive left-leaning candidate that may run, or whoever else may end up coming out from the left. And to just say something as simplistic as, well, I'm better than Ron Johnson, while accurate, it's just not enough. I want to hear policy. I want to hear what you're going to do to kind of attack some of these systemic inequalities that are ravaging the day-to-day life of the American citizens.
Yeah, and maybe eventually he'll address those issues as the primary goes along, but we have yet to see at this point. So we'll find out. So let's move on to Tom Nelson. So Tom Nelson, as we mentioned in the opening, he's the county executive for Outagamie County. And basically he was also a Bernie delegate, but basically it seems like he is trying to fill that progressive left lane. He says he supports Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, unionization, and he's kind of touting his background, saying, in 2007 he helped a paper mill that was about to be auctioned off to a industrial scrap dealer, and he helped fight against that. And to this day, they say the paper mill is still there. So in all, they say it saved about 300 jobs in the area, which is pretty good. Whenever you're saving jobs for working class people, that's always a plus. But I don't know too much about his full policy platform because he hasn't put it on his website, just like Lazary, to be fair. But on Twitter, he's very active, and he talks about a lot of progressive issues. So I think, there's still a lot more to learn about him. But what is very interesting to me is that he is in a red county. So Outagamie County is a red county. But he won running on a progressive platform, which is very interesting to me. So if you do extrapolate that and say, okay, we have a very purple state, he could technically win running on a progressive platform and on a statewide basis. But, one county is just one county. It would be a lot harder on a statewide level. But, Will, I know you got a chance to check Tom out a little bit. What are your initial thoughts on him?
Well, first of all, I'd kind of like to say I really don't think that Wisconsin is purple. I think Wisconsin is a blue state that's just gerrymandered to all hell. You look at I believe the Democratic candidate has won 6 out of the last 7 statewide elections. In its entirety, when you look at the state as a whole, I think we tend to lean left a lot more than our state representation looks like, which is not shocking at all. The Republican playbook has been gerrymander everything into non-existence so that we can keep pushing our unpopular policies. But the time that I spent with Tom through the delegate process, he was very articulate, very well spoken. He made a lot of very, very good points. I found him to be intelligent. I found him to be knowledgeable about a lot of the specific issues that are affecting a lot of Wisconsinites, and he did come off as quite progressive, which I was very happy to see. As you did say, his website doesn't exactly list policies or anything that he necessarily will be directly supporting, but I think his Twitter has been pretty active in showing that he leans more progressive than what you would expect out of a stereotypical establishment candidate. And I will also add that some of my extremely neoliberal establishment acquaintances will argue till they're blue in the face that Tom's not a good person, that he's not very nice, and all the generic BS that establishment people will say about progressive candidates to try to dissuade the voters from really looking into them. And to me, that's a huge plus. If
Right.
know that if we've seen it before with Bernie Sanders, if the establishment is ragging on you for not being nice or for being a meanie bobini or whatever, it's because they know that they can't actually argue your policies because your policies are popular and will be supported by a vast majority of the constituents. So in that regard, big thumbs up. I love that. As I said, every conversation we had through the delegate process was very positive. We didn't necessarily get a chance to speak one-on-one, but the Bernie delegates of Wisconsin were very active in organizing kind of group think sessions where we'd get together via Zoom and just kind of talk about what we were thinking, what ideas we wanted to see for the platform, how we best thought the Wisconsin delegation could represent Senator Sanders and the people who voted for him. So in that regard, I was quite impressed by Tom Nelson.
Yeah, I would like to go back to that point about kind of how neoliberals would attack them on character, but that's kind of the neoliberal playbook right there. If you can't fight them on policy, just go to character assassination. And we've seen that endlessly with Bernie, like, oh, he's disheveled, he's old, he's mean, he yells a lot. But what about his policies? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. That's not important. But that's the thing that's extremely important. And yeah, I think that is something to look out for. And it happens a lot. And unfortunately, it works with the neoliberal base. If they can paint this person as mean or not workable or not somebody you can work with, it works for the neoliberal base. But maybe he can overcome that with more time and more campaigning. But yeah, I think what's interesting, what else is interesting about Tom Nelson is that he actually ran for lieutenant governor and he ran for Congress. So he definitely seems that he has some political ambitions. Now, running for these offices aren't bad inherently, but I tend to not favor careers too much. So. But at the same time, if you're a progressive, we need more of those in office. But he definitely seems like he has a track record, which is fine because you can kind of look at his past policy proposals and what he supported. So I am looking forward to digging deeper into that. And he definitely supports organized labor, which is also a plus. But definitely looking forward to looking more into him and seeing as his campaign progresses. But just a little plug, we will be interviewing Tom Nelson this upcoming Wednesday, so we'll probably have that interview up this upcoming Thursday. So we will be looking forward to getting the discussion with him and getting to the Nixon crannies of policy. But let's keep moving forward. The third candidate who announced was Sarah Godlewski, and you guys probably heard of her. She is the current state treasurer of Wisconsin. So she was really big in combating Scott Walker and the Republicans from getting rid of the state treasurer position, because if you guys remember back in, I can't remember the exact year, but a few years back, they were actually trying to abolish the state treasurer and control the treasury themselves, which would have been a pretty bad nightmare. And we're already in a nightmare, but she says she wants to fight to combat climate change, fight to combat the cost of prescription drugs, raise the minimum wage, get rid of the filibuster. So those are all interesting policies. She also does not have any policies on her website as of yet. And that's pretty much par of the course for all the candidates at this point. So she policy-wise, she seems pretty well rounded. But we'll have to learn more about that in the coming future. But one of the things I do want to point out that did kind of give me another one of those red flags, and, it's not always bad, but it does give me a red flag, is that she worked with the Pentagon in her past career. She claims that it was about, finding ways to save the Pentagon money and better support troops. But I find that extremely hard to believe, considering the Pentagon just lost $21 trillion and don't know what the hell happened to it. So I don't know how you could really help them save money, considering they just waste it nonstop. But
the Pentagon is a literal fireplace where you just
Exactly.
throw money in and just whatever, it's gone. Who cares? Never see it again.
It's a money infirmary. That's what it is. That's where money goes to die.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so like that was a little bit of a red flag for me. But it's not too bad. I guess the other thing that I have my concerns about is that she's only been the state treasurer for one term because she got elected in 2018 as state treasurer. So it looks like she's kind of moving up that political career ladder, and she's kind of going on the career end, which, like I said, isn't inherently bad, but it does kind of give me a hint to press pause, because I'm like, hey, why don't you stage treasurer and actually do that job for a little while? But she's moving on pretty quick. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Sarah?
I can't necessarily fault her for that either. I mean, like I said before, Ron Johnson is just such an atrocious candidate that if the time is right to run for it, you're not going to find a much better incumbent to go up against unless Wisconsin elects a literal rock in 2022, and then 2028 might be a better opportunity. But I would probably rather have a literal rock than Ron Johnson, because a rock won't fly out, won't spend July 4th in Moscow. A rock won't go on Fox News and push white replacement theory and all that other BS that we've seen from Ron Johnson the past few weeks.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not always inherently bad. The reason why I say that is because usually when you have these people who are career politicians, they say one thing while on the campaign trail and completely turn around when they're in office, and their only motivation is to stay in that seat. They don't really care about actually serving the people. So that's why it gives me a little bit of pause. But, like I said, it's not inherently bad because, Bernie Sanders, he ran for office pretty much all his life, and he's pretty much a career politician, and we see how he is. But but he's actually like more of a special case to the system, man, but not
I think
the
Bernie's
usual.
the anomaly. And that's not to say that he's perfect, because he's not. He's far
definitely
from
not.
perfect.
Yeah.
But if you compare him to what most people stereotypically imagine the generic politician to be, I do think he's a little bit different than those type of people.
Exactly. But yeah, just to go a little bit more into Sarah's background, her husband is a multimillionaire investor from Maryland, or Maryland, however you say it. Some people get really mad about that, but that's not inherently bad as well. I mean, I'm not against wealth per se, because FDR was pretty wealthy and he was one of the most progressive presidents in history. But I think that's still important to note, just for everyone to be informed about their decisions. So yeah, there's not much to say about Sarah. Like I said, a lot of these people are very vague on their policy platforms. But definitely looking forward to, maybe we'll get an interview with her. Looking forward to digging into her policy platforms and what she supports. But yeah, and you said, and there's one more candidate. And you said,
just to touch on one last thing about Sarah, quick. How I mentioned contacts in terms of Tom Nelson. I have a number of very progressive contacts that I think very highly of and very much trust the opinion of, who have said very good things about Sarah. So you compare that to the character assassination that we see from the standard neoliberal establishment. There are people who I trust who have said very good things about Sarah. So I'm looking forward to maybe getting a chance to speak with her, or having her come out with more definitive, concrete policies that she'll be supporting. I'd very much like to hear the route that she's planning on taking in that regard.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I think with all politicians, I think I'm always extremely skeptical, because at one point Tammy Baldwin was like super pro universal health care, and now she like barely ever talks about it. So it's just like things like that just put me off of politicians. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jilly. So I haven't got a chance to research her because she literally just announced. So do you want to start?
Sure. So Dr. Bettino actually is, I guess, the counter example to what you said before, in that she does have A pretty significant amount of policy issues on her website. She lists her opinion on the environment, healthcare, immigration justice, jobs, economy, infrastructure, women's issues, equality and minority rights, rights of senior citizens and persons with disabilities, Wisconsin family farmers, federal budget, Wisconsin's working families, public education, veterans' rights, and gun safety. Now, it's not like she has, she hasn't written an entire book on her opinion of each of these topics, but she at least has a few sentences to give a generic overview of what she thinks about a lot of these issues. And first of all, obviously, I think that's incredibly important to let your constituents know what you think about these issues. I wish all of the candidates would already have that on their website. Maybe they're trying to get run some numbers behind the scenes and see what a higher percentage of the population thinks about a lot of these issues. But Jillian seems to be, at least based on what she lists on her website, I would say she is the most progressive candidate that we see in the race right now. I like her stance on the environment. I like she has a Greta Thunberg quote: "Humanity is standing at a crossroads. We must now decide which path we want to take. How do we want the future living conditions for all living species to be?" And anyone can do and say and just put quotes or whatever, but I think the big point of that is when you're willing to put the quote of a person who, I hate to say contentious because it really shouldn't be, a young woman coming out and fighting for a world that can sustain human life going forward shouldn't be considered a political issue. But of course, we know how divisive Americans get over literally everything. So by being willing to put a name of someone whose ideas you support forward, because I'm a big Greta fan myself, so to be able to say, like, I stand behind what she's doing and what she's saying, I think that's great. She mentions that she, as a public health professional who has seen the outcomes of the pandemic, she is dedicated to a robust national program to counter COVID-19. She also believes that we need a strong universal healthcare system. That's obviously huge for a lot of people. The single-payer system would revolutionize American healthcare, and it's good to see candidates at least come out and say, this is what I support. Now, if that will continue, like you said with Tammy Baldwin, we see examples of that flipping. But I do see, based on what she's listed on her website, and again, I have not spoken with her in person. I follow her Twitter, so I've seen her saying these kind of things, but I will never argue against putting someone with a working background in the sciences and healthcare industry to the forefront of these debates. I will never argue against that. She seems to be a big proponent of public education and increasing the funding for public education, which I love. I can't come out and say, oh well, this is my candidate right now, because there's a long way to go. But I'm happy to see a lot more people from outside the standard political realm of Wisconsin politics tossing their hat in the ring and saying, like, hey, well, this is what I think. Let's see if the people support that.
Yeah, and I think it's a really nice benefit, because when she's going to be, putting proposals forward when it comes to combating COVID-19, she has a background in the medical field. So, I think that's great. But I think it's a breath of fresh air that she has a policy platform, because I think so many people are so vague on these issues, and I think it's the most important part of politics is policy. So if you're leading the forefront with that, I think that's amazing, and I'm looking forward to checking that out. And as far as it comes to climate change and quoting Greta Thunberg, I think that's amazing as well, because she's literally hinting to the next generation, like, hey, I'm going to listen to your voice, and I'm actually going to do something about it. So many times, these politicians, they say they feel our plight. They say they know what we're going through, but they don't actually take action. And that kind of gives me a hint that she would be really serious about taking action against climate change, which is, if we're lucky, me and you will see our late 30s, but, who knows how long we got on this planet if we keep on our current trajectory. But
And
yeah,
Ben
I think
Shapiro says 4 degrees Celsius is not that big a deal. So
yeah, it's not that big a deal until everybody's dead. But not a big deal, Ben. But yeah, I think this field of candidates is very interesting. I'm not gonna say I like them all, but I think it's a very interesting field of candidates. I think it's kind of typical of what you get in political races. You got the rich person, you got the underdog, you got the political establishment, and then you have the elected officials. So I think it's pretty much standard so far, but just a hint, there are supposed to be a few more candidates running for office. I read in some articles that Mandela Barnes, who is the current lieutenant governor, might be putting his name in the race, which I think would be very interesting. He has a very progressive background, so that would be interesting to see if he puts his hat in the ring. And yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting race. But I what I don't want to see is what happened in the 2018 governor's race. In full disclosure, I worked for Mike McCabe, and there was a lot of attempts to discredit Mike just because he was progressive, and like you said, they go to the character assassinations because they don't want to fight you on policy. And I'd rather not see that. If there's going to be differences and fights, I would much like to see it be based on policy and not character assassinations. But we'll see. For now, it's very cordial. It's very early in the race. But I would definitely like to see all of these candidates' stance on money and politics, and I'm sure many of them are gonna have a very different stance that I would like to see. I would prefer campaign finance reform. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting race, and looking forward to seeing who's going to go toe-to-toe with Ron Johnson.
if Ron Johnson decides, remember that he originally said that he was only planning on serving 2 terms.
Yeah.
Now, this may seem kind of counterintuitive, but I think I would rather Ron Johnson run again. Because, as I said, I think Ron Johnson is universally unpopular. I think he's pathetic. I think he's an atrocious human being. And I think that it gives a much better shot for whoever's running against him to be running against Ron Johnson rather than somebody who actually had just won a Republican primary. To kind of take it back to the Democratic candidates, Tom Nelson threw his hat in the ring for quite a while ago. And now, with Lasry and Godlewski and Dr. Jillian running as well, if you had to pick who you think right now is the quote-unquote front runner, who do you think that would be?
Whew, that's a tough one. If I was just kind of going off the top of my head, I would probably say Sarah Godlewski because she has that statewide name recognition. So people already know who she is. Even though Alex Lasry is a billionaire, he's kind of fringe at this point. Like, he's really well known in Milwaukee because he's done a lot of work there, but I don't know if the rest of the state actually recognizes him. And Tom Nelson, he's ran a few times, but I don't know if a lot of people remember his early runs for Congress and lieutenant governor. So just by kind of name recognition, I would say Sarah Godlewski would be the front runner. But as far as the money goes, it looks like Lasry has already raised over $1 million.
He'll have the money. He'll have the establishment behind him. He's got all the names. He's got all of the support from the people whose names are known. Let's put it that way. Despite his name potentially not being as common knowledge, though I do think that it's pretty easy to change that with the amount of resources that he'll have at his disposal, on top of the fact that, he can kind of hide behind I guess it's not really hiding, but he can use the point that of the Bucks having been turned around. The Bucks were the dictionary definition of mediocrity for about 15 years. We weren't going anywhere. We were a bottom seller NBA roster for as long back as I can remember. I was but a child in 2001 when we with Ray Allen and Sam Cassell and Big Dog Robinson when we made that run to the Eastern Conference Finals. And now the past 2 years, obviously with the Bucks finishing with the top record in basketball and having a back-to-back MVP, the state is pretty excited to get behind them, and I think the name recognition of associating himself with the Bucks will certainly help. It can't hurt, at least.
Yeah, it definitely can't hurt, but I definitely can say having money in itself isn't going to guarantee he's going to win. Just going back to 2018 during the governor's race, there was this millionaire who ran in the governor's race, and I think he spent like $1 million of his own dollars, trying to get his name out there. And nobody, he had to drop out before the actual primary vote because he just could not connect with people because he was just so out of touch. And I don't know. We'll see how Lazary does, but money in itself does not mean you're gonna win. It does give you a leg up. Not gonna downplay it, but it's not a true factor when it comes to at least state politics. On a national scale, it's very different. But yeah, so we'll see.
Just once, I want one of these rich guys to recognize the privilege that they come from, come out and say, I have way too much money. There's a much better way for a sustainable, healthy society to distribute this type of wealth, and I will fight to create a system that does a better job distributing that wealth. Just once. Why can't we have one person who's I guess Bruce Wayne's not the best example because he's not necessarily, assisting society in realistic ways because we don't really have Batman villains running around. Though I guess you could make the argument that Jeff Bezos and is kind of a Batman villain with what he's doing.
Yeah, he's definitely some type of Batman villain in an alternate universe.
We don't have rich guys donning suits and beating these people up. And I wish these rich guys could just use their place in society as a rich person to kind of take those advantages and help to redistribute them amongst the population.
I just want one of them to come out here to say, I'm running to tax my own wealth and give you healthcare, and I'm sold. There you go.
Tom Steyer
Keep it simple.
Kind of tried that.
But the reason the weird part about Tom Steyer is he was just so unrelatable, and I think that's where he failed because people couldn't feel like they can relate to Tom Steyer, and he was just so kind of billionaire kooky. I don't know if you remember, but he had that concert. Wasn't it with Juvenile or something? And it was just so cringe. I'm just dude, you do not know how to connect to people. It's so weird. Yeah, so there's your initial candidates. There might be more in the future. Definitely encourage you all to check out these candidates and look up more about them and their backgrounds. But like I said, we're going to be interviewing Tom Nelson soon, and hopefully we can interview the other candidates. So looking forward to that. But is there anything else you wanted to add, Will?
Now that we're starting to get our vaccination rates up, the weather's starting to get nice. We lived through. We saw what kind of detrimental impacts the pandemic had on all aspects of life, and I hope this really awakened a lot of people's eyes to just how much the ultra rich pillage from the rest of us. So many people lost their jobs, lost their health care, and the unfathomably rich gained $4 trillion in the past year. That be prepared to stand up for yourself, your family, your community. Change does not happen overnight, but change also does not happen without fight. And the rich and powerful have been waging class warfare on us now for all of time, really. But it's really ramped up in the past 30, 40, 50 years. And it's time the people take a W back for themselves. So, now that the weather's getting nicer and we're all starting to get vaccinated, let's get out there. Let's do stuff for our community. Let's make our voices heard. It's time for a change, and we the people need to be the ones funneling this change, or it's never going to happen.
Well said, Will. Thank you guys for joining us on the Our Wisconsin Revolution podcast. We are continuing the fight for progressive values, and we will continue to upload on this podcast. And thank you for tuning in. You guys have a great day.
Stay safe and healthy, everybody.
So we always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave,